All right, make sure you've settled in. All right. Every time we have any, we'll have opening statement. We'll have um, rebuttal for 2 minutes after the opening statement. After the both opening statements, so that way we can get our final words in on it, and then we'll go 20 minutes of questioning, or excuse me, it'll be 10 minutes for your side, 10 minutes for my side, questioning, and then there'll be a free-for-all. Got it?
Yeah.
Okay, you're not close enough to your mic or something, because maybe I turned down my volume. Speak again.
I said all right. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, okay. It's my end. I was down a little bit. So I'm AJ Hill. I'm a Latter-day Saint on fire. Keith Reed has agreed with me to meet in a debate on probably several different points, but we were having a discussion on how is it capable for there to be a God without there being a creator of the universe. Is that right, Keith?
Sorry, you were kind of breaking there. You were doing an introduction of you and me.
Yeah,
and then...
I said me and Keith were starting a discussion, and we'll continue it here, and it be on, can there be a God without there being a creation of the universe?
Essentially, yes.
Yeah, is that what we're thinking about? Okay, good. So I will give Keith just a few minutes to introduce himself at least, and then we'll go from there as far as opening up our dialogue. So go ahead, Keith. Who are you?
I'm Keith Reed. I'm 18 years old. I've known AJ. He was part of the church that I went to. He was part of Second Ward. I was part of First. We were very near with that. I grew up in the church that he participates in, the LDS church, to be specific, because I was born into it. My mom and dad both were members, which resulted in me being a member. So I know pretty well the principles and doctrines in which the LDS church goes by. And I've been questioning quite a bit of it, which me and AJ have discussed quite frequently. So that's how this kind of resulted.
Very good. At least we got started. So, all right, Keith, do you want to take first stab at an opening statement on your understanding of the dynamics between God and the universe, or in how one on your perspective of what that looks like?
Well, actually, I think you could go right ahead first. I'm fine with that.
Okay, I'll go first. So let me get to some understandings here. I'm going to take a minute just to get back to some slides that I made. I want to make sure that we both understand what this looks like. Yeah, where's my other camera? All right, behind me, I've got a few slides. And it says that the universe is 93 billion light years in distance. It's a number. We can't really understand that number because it takes us away from where we are prospectively in our minds. We can understand going 20 miles and a car driving 60 miles per hour. It would take us 20 minutes to arrive to that destiny based on no variables in that travel. And then we could look at going 100 miles in a car that's driving at 60 miles an hour, and it's going to take us 60 minutes. And then therefore we can reason, and we can continue to reason what numbers and how they apply to distance and time of travel by and we can understand that even increasingly by adding more distance and adding more time. Even the number 93 billion light years has at least a reference point of distance and time. It would take us to go from one point of the universe where scientists have said that we can estimate out that the universe is 93 billion light years in distance. The known universe, not the universe entirety, but the known universe, which is a whole different story. The known universe is 93 billion light years. So, in order for us to understand what that distance looks like, we're going to the next slide here, if I can. I'm quite incapable. Okay. So a light year is 5.88 trillion miles. That means 93 billion light years, and you times that by 5.88 trillion miles. So the number is completely out of our, it's so far from our imagination that we don't even understand what that looks like. We just give it a number, we apply that number, and all of a sudden it just works in our head somehow. We don't know how, but it works. We still have distance, we still have time. Time is the distance, that light year is a distance that light travels over years. Time, that's what a light year is. So 93 billion light years of distance, still we can kind of look at that. Then you look at the next slide here. This is what the problem was with the dark ages of religion. They absolutely said that the earth was the center of the universe, and Galileo basically said, no, it's not the center of the universe. We rotate around the sun. He's put on house arrest. He's being harassed. So they didn't like it back in the 1500s and before that and after that. When there was a new idea brought forth in the days of old, even Jesus Christ, when he brought forth the idea that he himself could be God in the flesh, it was completely denied by those who were of old tradition, that had a mindset on what things were supposed to be. So just because they have grown from an age that looks like a far distant time from us, and they were more close to the language in which was written about these things, doesn't mean they were right. It just means that they had an opinion. And opinions and societies are grown from a respect of an individual that has gained the favor of others. And that society grows to the point where they start to center their existence around what they see as the ultimate of authority. They create, what they essentially create is a god based on principles and laws that form their society. Many of the times the ancient Egyptians and the Jews would chase after other gods, and Babylonian had their gods, and many other societies had their God, and they created that God within the framework of how their society could flourish and function. The Romans had many of gods, and there's the the idea of a god was anybody with superior greatness over humanity. And let me make sure that I'm not going over my time. Polytheism is having multiple gods, essentially creating gods that you worship or you idolize. It doesn't, some people in Christianity say that it is just the acknowledgement of other gods that creates you as a polytheist. Okay, well, I acknowledge other gods, and therefore I'm a polytheist, and the title doesn't really scare me. Nobody, I'm not going to hell because I'm a polytheist. In that right. I refer you to Paul's writings, who says there are gods many, but we only have one God, and that is the Father. And we have many lords. And the word Lord has been used simultaneously to those have authority within their own the Lord of the vineyard, the Lord of his household, and things like that will be given a moniker of greatness by using the words that they do, like the word Lord. And I am going to make sure that my time is not interrupted by Keith by telling me I've got 3 minutes left. I got 1:40. Thanks, Keith, for reminding me. But again,
No, actually, I said you could go 3 to 5 minutes over.
Right.
I'm only gonna do like a brief opening.
Okay. So again, when we take away, when we try to create a God that forms a very minute idea in our heads, then it's hard for us to distinguish what the word really applies to. The word God is that which has dominion, that which affects nature and man. It is the balcony area in a theater. So, and when we have superior attributes that people have, like the greatest of all time, they become gods essentially to those who idolize them and want to become like them. And God is nothing more than that which we adhere to greatness to. And with that, I end my opening remarks. And now it is time for Keith to make his opening statement.
I'm actually surprised you ended early. You were kind of worried about going over it. Said you could. You weren't done with your slides, it didn't look like, but I'm gonna start off. I'm gonna be honest. AJ, we've talked quite a bit. I think we're very similar with the way that we debate. Like, for example, you probably came into this, the only preparation you had was the slides. You're freelancing the rest of it. Would that be correct?
No, because I've done this dialogue for 20 years. So I'm always prepared.
You're prepared to give the dialogue, but you don't actually have like something in front of your screen saying this is what I should say.
I'm very,
That's my point.
yes.
Okay.
Do I have a
So
script? No, I don't have a script. You're right.
yeah, exactly. I do the same. So I actually wasn't expecting opening session, but for opening session, I guess what I'll say is the whole reason this started out for me was I noticed a bunch of like contradictions within the LDS religion as a whole. Just things that just didn't make any sense that I will elaborate on later. And this led to the big question, which we're doing right now today, is God himself. And the way I described this was we as people, if God is real, we would be in a box. Consider Earth our box. And in order for God to exist, the universe would have had to create something, which would have been God, the immortal, which would in turn create us. But in order for this to work, God then has to be able to utilize what I call the Trinity of Trinities. Gas, liquid, solid, which would be matter, past, present, future, which would be time, and length, width, height, which would be length, width, height. Sorry, I got tongue-tied, which would be matter. I mean, space. Sorry, I'm getting confused here. So Trinity of Trinities.
Relax, you've got 10 minutes, but there's 8 minutes, so keep going.
Length, width, height, past, present, future, gas, liquid, solid. And in turn, what this does is it allows him to utilize existing science, which he was created by. The universe has created God, and he will use that existing science to create us. So he's using the Trinity of Trinities, but in order to be God, he cannot be affected by the Trinity of Trinities, or else by definition, he would no longer be God. Which brings into question, is he affected or is he not affected? Which I also linked to the contradictions within the LDS church and church as a whole, because when you look at scriptures or doctrines and principles, which principles should be based on doctrine, that seem to do complete 180s inside church organizations throughout time based on what the accepted thing at the time is, basically hopping on the bandwagon, which if God's doctrine was true, it would be unchanging and forever. It would not be able to be altered based on human perception of what is correct at the time. And I also want to bring into question, because since we mentioned this conversation earlier, I noticed that when you did your slideshow, you brought up matter briefly, for the most part, space and time, which would lead into addressing the Trinity of Trinities. However, giving those very large numbers, it would bring into question our numerical system that we know of today. So everybody knows 2 + 2 = 4, but why? Why does it equal 4? Why does it not equal 5? You have to question everything. So even though we know it's true, we have the proof and evidence that shows 2 + 2 = 4. It is important to note that if 90% of the world today agree 2 + 2 = 5, that truth would be distorted and people would then agree 2 + 2 = 5, even if mathematically it is not proven and the universe says that it will not work. If people as a whole, because people are faulty and man is not perfect, would say 2 + 2 = 5, then that would be the new truth. However, we know that 2 + 2 = 4. So it brings that whole situation into question, among other things, which I would like to address later. And I think it's just a whole thing that connects. This is why I really don't like religious debates, because they really do seem undebatable as a whole. I love debating, but religious debates seem undebatable because in order to prove that God is real, you would have to reference, I guess, scripture for one. The main thing you would reference is scripture, which is already assuming based on the premise that God is real. Therefore, is it really proving that he is real? And then if I were to say God is not real, I would also be wrong in that assumption, because there is no substantial evidence or proof to prove that he is not real. What you really have to say is, I'm going to play a devil's advocate and assume nothing at this point. God may be real, he may not be, which would be the definition of a true atheist. They cannot prove nor disprove God. So now when everybody goes to do like a religious debate, it's a circular argument that just keeps wrapping back around to the first premise or first point made to begin with. So I guess the only real solution would be to die, and if he is real, we will see him on Judgment Day. If not, we will never get to know, because we'd be right, but we wouldn't be able to understand that, as we would be dead and no other life. So with that, I would like to end my opening remarks.
Very good. So I'm going to take a couple of minutes here, and I'm going to lay out some groundwork based on his examples, and then he will have the same opportunity after me. So Keith has mentioned that within the structure of the LDS Church, which we are associated, at least at one time, or still associated with, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that it seems to be changing, whereas God is not change. But we have to first ask the question, does God exist? Does God exist as the example is proven in the Bible? And then if we can agree that the Bible has relevancy to the connection of a God, then you can see within the Bible that when Abraham came up against the wall there, and he's told that you need to go find people in the Sodom and Gomorrah, and go get your brother and his family out of there. Abraham said, "Well, what about? I don't want you to destroy the two cities, because what if I find 100 people?" And God says, "Yes, fine. If you find 100 people, I won't destroy it." And then there was 50, and then there was 20, then there was 10, and then you have Moses, who was told by God, "Hey, make a whole new kingdom right from your loins, and we'll just destroy the rest of the people." Moses said no, and God repented. Has God changed? Again, many a times. Okay, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Sorry, I just didn't want to be disrespectful and walk off while you're making your
Yeah, you're
remark.
fine.
All right, so as I was saying, with the LDS contradictions, there are quite a few, including, if we're going to look at modern day times, that would include like same-sex marriage applications and stuff like that, which are very politicized and tend to disrupt with the going of balancing the churches want to support its members, but also attracting new eyes to the church as a whole. Then there's also things such as polygamy, which is very well discussed multiple times by a lot of people. And I would also go with, it's not just contradictory doctrines, it's also disavowed doctrines. There are many doctrines that are just now, in the eyes of the church today, abhorred by its leaders and accused of being false doctrine or things manipulated by Satan as rumors, but were actually taught and practiced, or sometimes not implemented, but taught and as doctrine to the church, in particular being the blood atonement, which was key with Joseph Smith's teachings and Brigham Young wanting to implement it, but not implemented due to governmental reasons. And then the Adam with God theory that was very widely accepted in the early days and establishments and roots of the church, and bleeds into many things such as ceremonial practices, for example, which are now no longer present in today's version of the LDS church, but were a thing. Mark Hoffman and his illegal dealings with Gordon B. Hinckley, a prominent figure in the LDS church. And then also, I would add Joseph Smith, his family history, and the origins of the Book of Mormon being a key cornerstone in the church. So looks like my time's up.
Very good. So now we're going to take 10 minutes each and ask questions. And if we need to adjust that time, we certainly will. I will give the advantage to Keith if he wants to ask me questions first, or he's going to give me the advantage, let me pound him first. What do you want, Keith?
Well, in that case, I guess I'll let you have the advantage. Fire away.
All right. So, question is, how do you come to the conclusion that there's a God? If you say there's a God. Now, do you say there's a God? That's first question.
Well, I would have to start off with, I wouldn't come to a conclusion. The issue being, you would have to research, and within the research, it won't make a difference because you can neither prove nor disprove with the quality of information that we have at our hands,
Right.
based on both key practices within the doctrine accepted within churches and not accepted on the polar opposite side. There's really no balance.
Okay, so obviously through religion, you cannot prove there's a God. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay. Through science, can we prove, or let's do it this way. The dictionary, it has a definition of the word God. Do you accept the dictionary as being a useful tool in the court of law when it applies grammar and definition when spoken of in a court of law?
I'm not going to take up too much of your time, but I would accept the dictionary definitions and terms to be utilized in the court of law, as both are societal implementations, including grammar, which would be our human way of speaking and understanding each other. So it was designed just to understand. So every single word is designed to have some sort of meaning, but each word can only be described by other words. So like Einstein famously said, like if you use a word and someone else doesn't understand it, if you cannot explain it to a fourth grader, you do not know what that word means. All that means is you would have to explain it in simpler terms, meaning that you now understand the word. But it does not mean that the word in general had a root other than being derived by man's creation. So therefore, grammar itself is derived by man. Court of law is man-made. They coincide, and I think that both being coincided, they justify both means.
So let me I want to go back to a reference, since we can kind of use that as a stepping stone of, you explain to the audience this 2 + 2 = 5. Now, if you went this way, all right, and you were to use the definition of the word 5, and was his description, that many fingers, okay, then it works, because you can use the word 5 and you can reference anything.
Exactly, because we gave the word 4 or 5 meaning. We gave it meaning by saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We gave those words meaning.
Yeah, but let me finish my question. But if you were to establish this is 2, establish this is 4, all right, this is 2, this is 4. If you said, and you established this was the number 5, all right, then you would have to make one of your 2's a lie. It would have to look like that. So if you're saying that 2 + 2 is 5, one of them has to look like that in order for it to work. Is that right?
Correct, which is why 2 + 2 = 4.
Right. So there's definitely, so is there a definite definition to the word 2?
Based on our capabilities and our understandings, we have created a definition for 2, which by our standards means that it is true. There is no denying that 2 + 2 = 4.
Right.
However, with human fallibility, my point was some people could mistake it. And if 90% of the world said 2 + 2 = 5, the world would accept it as truth, even if it is not scientifically or mathematically true.
Right. So when we talk about definitions within the dictionary and the word God comes up, it also uses the word supreme being. It uses the word balcony, or the highest place in the theater, balcony. It also uses that which affects man and nature. So it also, in what we could reference to, that which has dominion, that which is worshipped, that which has creative power. Would you agree that these are attributes of a God if it did exist?
If it did exist, then yes, those would be the attributes of a god.
Creator, that which has dominion, that which is worshipped. Okay.
All of the above.
All right. So is there any evidence that man is becoming more godlike with those 3 definitions being in play, whether it be worshipped, because we know that we put people on pedestals and put the name God upon them. We've worshipped and we've set judges in place to have dominion and have effect over us. And we also have creative power, whether it just be the natural course of bringing forth human life or the edifices that we create from our own hands. So can the word God be applied to man?
Well, in each aspect, the word God could be applied in a sense to certain people based on those attributes. So, like you have celebrities, you would say, the first one you mentioned, like we're putting them on a pedestal. They may not have the other godlike attributes, but we are now classifying them under that because they meet one of the criteria. In order to actually be God himself, you would have to meet all the criteria if he were to exist.
Right. So let's go to the next step here. So now that we've established, and Keith is the first honest person that I've ran into that everybody else that has cried out, there is no God, the atheist, the self-proclaimed atheist, really.
Well, that would be more of an agnostic.
Right. But what I'm saying, but even the agnostics will balk at the idea that the word has any definition or applies in any way. So I appreciate that about Keith. So now, is our science today allowing us to become more godlike? Creative powers.
I would say science-wise in that one aspect, like creation and stuff, yes. In all other aspects, I don't see very much of a change or a variable in that. I would say that societally, we've constructed this idea, like, for example, putting people on a pedestal. Like, we've done this before, like with kings and stuff. It's just more common and we do it more frequently. That's why we have celebrities in Hollywood and stuff like that. People do this all the time.
Right. So now the question, so we know that people are put up on pedestals. Science is allowing man to have the attribute of creator. I mean, and you agree with that, is that right? To a certain extent, to a certain
degree,
point.
To a certain degree, I would say yes, because as I explained before, we live in a box, and in the parameters of that box, we can only apply certain science and stuff to those aspects of life. Therefore, yes, we can alter and change certain things within that box based on the parameters set by the box.
So
yes.
let me ask you this. Is there any talk in the science world of colonizing other planets?
Well, like Mars, you see sometimes people will say, well, if Earth is gone, we want to try to colonize Mars, which includes actually theories with like nuking the surface in order to mess with the atmosphere and stuff. So there is work towards that in the science aspect of things.
Is there any conversation in science to bring forth immortality?
There has been, which includes like the actual DNA sequencing and genome. There's something called the triple helix. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
All right, so you know what I'm talking about then. Some people figure that the triple helix, which mathematically, when you do all the math numbers, results in the number 666, which relates to the religious thing, because this whole immortality thing relates from religion, so it all ties in together when they actually come up with this theory. It was meant to bring immortality. So people have been working towards creating the triple helix, the next advancement of genome for mankind.
Okay, last question. Are we the most advanced beings in the universe?
Well, here's the thing about that. That is kind of unanswerable. We don't know everything within the universe. But to simply sum it up, I would say probably not. And the reason being, if you look at our closest relative being the monkey, because how can you explain opposable thumbs, right? I'm kidding. But if we look at our closest living ancestor on Earth, their brain capacity, they've been known to use tools and stuff, pretty crafty with things, but they couldn't imagine doing the capabilities that a human does. Now, that's just a slight change in DNA and genetic sequencing. Imagine a being with a slight alteration compared to our DNA and sequencing. Their toddlers would be learning calculus or like multivariable calculus or things with rocket science and stuff, while our toddlers are learning the ABCs. It would be a vast difference. So I would say probably not.
That
We are not the most
that we are not the most intelligent being in the universe.
correct.
So very good. And I will end my time there, and I will allow you to have your 10 minutes plus so that you can ask me questions. And it's open. Latter-day Saint questions, whatever suits your
Trying to
fancy.
think how I want to first. All right, I think I'll start this off with something that you brought up earlier. The whole 2+2 thing, since I mentioned it, 2+2 is 4 and 5. How do we know that? And then you went and brought it up again with your questioning remarks after I introduced it. So, being how do we know 2+2 equals 4? If you say there's a God, is there a God?
Yeah, just by definition, there's a God.
So by definition, there's a God. You believe in
Dude,
God. You
hold on.
support this.
Your mic went out, so please.
Are you sure it went out?
Yeah, it did. It started. It just got muffled real quick, and then you came back in. So
You
please.
got me now?
I hated breaking your train of thought. So
Could you add 35 seconds to the clock, please, if you don't
well,
mind?
you'll get it. You'll get it.
Cool.
It's just a reference point. It's not really hard.
Yeah.
Fast.
All right. So as I was saying was you believe in, you support, and you honor this higher God. Would that be correct?
How do I answer that? Just as a theoretical understanding, whatever principles and laws I apply to my life becomes my God. And those principles and laws have a creator. And that creator is the one who I look to as being the example of those laws and principles. Do I worship a God? Yes, of course I do. I have a Father in heaven who created this opportunity for me.
So we've established that man as a whole is fallible. We make mistakes. We are not perfect. But as you would believe, God is perfect. Do you support this statement? Yes or no?
No.
God can make mistakes. He's not perfect.
Well, we just established earlier that God himself in the Old Testament repented a couple of times.
Wouldn't that be Jesus?
Yeah, well, it's Jehovah. Well, that's up to you to decide that. If it is Jesus, it's Jehovah is the person who is speaking in those relevancy. And most people would deny the idea that God had repented for anything. It's just a turning away from one thought to another thought, which brings about a better conclusion at the time.
All right, to make it relatable to your religion being LDS, which you currently stand by, you said Jehovah, which would be Jesus.
Eventually, he becomes Jesus Christ, yes.
Because you separate as distinct beings, three different members of the Godhead, but one in purpose, right? So Jehovah would be Jesus, Elohim would be God. So God and Jesus are different, distinct beings, yes or no?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so therefore, you said Jesus had to repent, as stated in the Old Testament, because again, you have to use scripture to prove your belief in God, right?
No, I don't have to use scripture to base a understanding of that God exists. We already established that. I said science is and the definition itself established whether or not a God exists.
But you said Jesus even had to repent, which would be leading by example. He can make mistakes because he is only part immortal. That's the only reason he was able to be crucified, because he could die, but he had to give up the ghost because he was part immortal.
Now, I want to elaborate if you're going to ask that question.
Sure.
Again, you asked me a question, is God perfect? I said no.
But then you refer to Jesus rather than God.
No, I'm referring to any existence in the universe. Because the universe is one mass, and all things within that one mass have the potential to increase its perfection. It's like this: if you were to take, I've machined several parts or whatever in my time. If you were to machine and your value is that you're trying to achieve is within 0.0001 of the measurement that you're looking for, you could extend those numbers out, those zeros out, for an infinity amount of time and still not be perfect, because you still have to have the value of the number one in order for it to be in order for it to have a reference of measurement. So no matter how perfected God can become, he's always got the next zero to add in front of the infinity amount of zeros he already has.
Well, I was trying to get to that with that's man's part of the number system, which is why I was making the opening statement earlier that you elaborated on. However, God himself, by definition, should be all-knowing, a supreme being, and should by definition, be perfect. As you stated, by definition, he could do all these things. But by definition, you failed to mention that the church has repeatedly stated he is all-knowing, he's omnipresent, and he is perfect. Because he is all-knowing, he cannot make mistakes. He knows everything that was, is, and will be.
And if you take the King Follett discourse, God was once a man as we are now, and we become as he is now. So there is progression in our language all the time. There's progression.
Then
and
that would be
means the Father himself, and therefore now there is the universe. See, me and Keith will differ on this a little bit, but I'm going to establish it this way. The universe is a perfect mass. Perfect. Because it exists. Without its perfection, it could not exist. God in the universe, in my mind, is one and the same. And within that universe, which is eternal, there's those beings that have established themselves to become more and more one with the universe, and have been able, me being able to receive prophetic dreams and all these other things. If I'm dreaming prophetically, that means I'm in tune with something that's distant out in front of me. And I've got plenty of examples of that. So if I can know, as a mere mortal being that's only 57 years old, what is the capacity of one who is eons in age?
Basically, we cannot understand the capability of our human mind cannot understand it.
Right. We couldn't understand what that imperfection could look like. We're just saying that, in my understanding, there is no perfection.
So I'm going to summarize what you've said, and I'm going to ask for a yes or no, just a yes or no. If you say no, I will try to go based on what you've said.
Right.
But all right, you said in order for the earth to work, it had to be perfect, but there is still capability of God to make an air
universe.
Universally, yes.
So no, the universe.
Universally, there is.
No, I'm saying the universe has to be perfect, not the
Earth. Not Earth itself, because you were talking about Earth. Sorry, I
was talking about the universe. I said a lot of things, so I'm going to give you more time because I'm dipping in, so I want to make sure that you're clear what I did say.
The universe as a whole has to be perfect in order for it to function and work.
Right.
However, God himself can fall ill to making mistakes, which would be outside of the universe because he's outside of the box that we are constrained in, that he is not constrained to. Yes or no?
Jesus Christ, yes, not the Father. Because you want me
to... Is the universe perfect? Is the universe perfect?
Yeah.
All right, but anything outside of the universe, which he exists outside of, can be prone to vulnerabilities, being not exact. Which you said, he's not perfect, but the universe, in order to function, that has to be perfect.
Right.
that was my first question that you said. All right. So
I lost it and I'm going to give you more time, Keith. Let me make sure that we got this right. So in your mind, and I don't want to ask a question, but what I'm reading in Keith's mind is God sits outside of the time and space, and therefore he created the universe as a whole,
or else he could not be God.
or he is not God. In
Correct.
my mind, I see God and the universe as being one and the same. So there's a difference of reasoning within our thought process. So when he's asking me a question about can God be fallible, I'm thinking about the beings within the universe that still have effect. And I want to answer this real quick, real simple, and real. Can our Father be perfected if his children are not perfected? Because we are one with him, and our perfection, as we become more perfected, so does he become more perfected. Even though that he's infallible when it comes to knowing and how to create a plan of action based on his foreknowledge of all things to come. Therefore, he does not make any errors because he has full understanding of every decision he makes and how it will affect the totality of the work that he's doing. And so with Jesus Christ, we know that it was given to us to know that he himself did not know the time that he would return. So he was fallible in the fact that he could not come to the conclusion when that time would be. So there's many layers to what I'm trying to say as far as whether God can be perfect or not. And it's very complicated. I think but just know this, that we couldn't see the point in which God is perfect at this time because we have no reference to how to measure that. We'd have to know him personally and say, God, can you tell me this? And he could explain to us more fully. So anyway.
All right, perfect. So I think we have reached a general consensus where we actually, for the most part, agree on the circumstances in which God would be or would not be real, except for the fact of being one or being outside and not constrained. But everything else we agree on.
Right.
Which I think would be perfect because when
you're muffled. Your speaker went muffled again.
I think it would be great. And can you hear me now? Understand?
Yeah, you're good.
All right. Which I think is great in debate settings because the actual purpose of it would be to learn and grow off of both sides' perceptions and evidence and stuff that they bring to the table. So I think it's great that we have come to a general consensus to start off.
Well, thank you. So I wanted to
now, based on that general consensus, I would like to make the point we've agreed that man is fallible, which means the number system, even though we know it to be true, which would kind of support both our points actually, even though we know it to be true to our understanding, is fallible in of itself.
Yeah, without man's truth injected into it, you cannot draw truth out of it.
Exactly. So like, for example,
it's like the scissors thing. Both have to apply.
Yeah. For example, like if you quickly say, if we're going to make a whole, 1/3 plus 2/3 equals 1. But however, 1/3 is 0.333%. It has margin of error. And 2/3 would be 0.66666%. So when you combine them, it's 0.9999%, but we're making that 1. We're saying that it's a whole. So even in of itself, the truth itself has some error in it.
Right, there is
systematic error.
We talked about the gray area. We talked about we talked about how everything is black and white, but we come from the same idea that it's all black and white,
But there's just a
but
sliver.
there's gray based on our own way to function within the black and white scope. But that is variable to each individual and based on whatever subject that they're engaged in or whatever demands their attention at the time. And I think there's depends on, like I said, those circumstances will be where those gray areas grow or they become collapsed even more. And as we grow in understanding and experience, and the gray area starts to fade away, and we understand things more clearly, what is dynamically black or white. So I had a question for you, Keith. Now, I know that we've established now. Where's your understand, or where's your thought process on a man such as Jesus Christ? And did he, or Jesus of Nazareth, and did he actually become resurrected?
Well, I will actually answer that once I finish my point. If I could have 2 minutes.
Yeah, please do. Don't let me throw you off. We're
So
we're on free
systematic.
for all right now, so I'm gonna you go ahead, and I'm gonna get my stuff going so that we can have some good times. All right.
All right. So systematically, there's an error due to man's fallibility. However, as I've tried explaining before, God himself, in order for the universe to work, we differ on this. In order to be God, he would have to be perfect. And for you, it's he has room for error outside of the universe. But the universe has to be perfect in your eyes in order for it to work and function. So now we've agreed on that. But also we have to agree that God has to work within the parameters of science. He is constrained to that science. So even though we may not understand to full capability the science or math in of itself, as we've established, there's 1/3 plus 2/3 doesn't actually equal one whole. We may not understand how that actually works, but it has to work.
Right. So
Okay.
did you
So
finish your point?
now going off those pretenses, God now has to create the universe based on science that we do not fully understand. So therefore, since we do not fully understand, we cannot actually prove that any of that is due to his doing rather than just the universe working it out, because then we would have to fully understand the science and math itself in order to say that makes perfect sense. Glad it works. We just know the universe exists and it works because of this, which we have some error in, but it works.
Very good. So
Right.
I want to scope out what he
So
was saying. Yeah, go ahead.
now my last part of it being that he cannot be affected by these things. He can utilize them, but he cannot be affected by them. Which brings me to the contradictions of time itself, which we've been told works differently in our time compared to his time. Matter, which is odd, because in order to matter cannot be created nor destroyed. It has to be like just altered or manipulated, which he would have had to do, but the universe itself would have had to exist already in order for him to utilize those properties to create what we know of the universe as today. So there's matter, and then also space, which we've established the number system and stuff. However, it's interesting to note that things that happen in the universe coincide with the God's would-be existence. Because if we look at, I think you've mentioned this before, governments have like some reign of power over like religions and places, like they control the religion, therefore that cannot be God's word because that is man's perception of the religion. But
Right.
however, if the LDS church were to be God's true church, why were we constrained to the times of human development and advancement or anything like that sort if the doctrine is unchanging? The doctrine itself would just then not be revealed as how it should be, and then it would be revealed later on when the time was ready. However, doctrine was said to be there, and then they took 180-degree turns and said, actually, that's false doctrine. We never approved that, even though they literally systematically embedded it in the system of the church itself and said, this is doctrine. This is God's word, not mine. This is God's word. Follow it. Have faith. Faith, because we cannot prove it. So faith, fill in the holes with faith. There you go.
Very good. So, a couple of questions on those points. The is now with your God that you're describing, the one outside of space time and all these different, the Trinity of Trinities. Does he have to work by the laws that he created, such as the effect that 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen would have on the human body, versus to make water or to continue the species, because that's what it does. It enables us to rehydrate, having those properties within us. So does he have to work within those laws in order to continue his work that he's doing?
I think that's where we also slightly defer. You said the laws that he created, is he confined to those, because you used my confined, but then you said the laws he created.
Yeah.
So I think that's where we defer, because I'm saying that in order for him to exist, if he does, he has to use the already existing science. How else did he come to be? He had to have come to be in a universe that already existed. He is only altering the matter that's already there using science. Science already says H2O is the only way water works. 2 hydrogens.
Yeah, so you're saying that matter has always existed? Is that what you're saying? Therefore, the universe has always existed?
The universe itself, before God, if he is real, came to be, already existed.
So now you've thrown me off a little bit, so I got to reestablish my head.
If you take water and you put it in a cup and you go to freeze it, the matter changes to an ice. It changes over a period of time. Now the size actually changes a little bit because of volume and surface area and stuff like that. But the matter itself all is the same. You can melt it down to water, it will be the same amount of water except for evaporation.
Right.
All these things, it's not created nor destroyed, it's just altered, it's changed. So the universe, in creating a God, that God in turn creating us, it all had to have already existed. He didn't create anything. If he is real, he is using the science behind it. But what I'm saying is it doesn't make sense, because he should be able to utilize it, but not be... he has to utilize it within the parameters, but he cannot be actually directly affected by it himself personally, which it appears to be that he does in a universal sense of things. Which by definition, he would not be God. Therefore, God cannot be real, even though it cannot be officially proven that he is or isn't. It is probable that he isn't real, and the universe in turn created us based on how time went and evolution and things like that, I guess.
Okay, now the question I have based on what you just said was, you're saying that God does exist outside of space and time, and the Trinity of all Trinities? Is that what you're saying?
If he does, he would have to.
Okay.
In order to be God.
So if God is only an idea, then a God does not exist. Is that right?
It's a concept.
If it's only a concept, then he does not exist. But we've established, did we not establish that if a God could create, if one could create, let's say other human beings like himself, like let's say that we have cloning. You understand? You agree with that? That we have the capacity to, or will have the capacity in 1,000 years to clone. Is that right?
Well, actually, we already have the capacity to clone.
Right.
But cloning itself would be taking something existent and replicating it but you're not
Right.
creating anything. You're taking matter that's already in the universe to create that replication,
Right, right.
just altering the matter that was already there. We call it create because the term is saying we're making something, but in turn, that something that we made was just altered matter.
Yeah.
It's still
So
something that already existed. We just changed it and morphed it into what it is now, and we call it creation, even though technically it's
so the universe really hasn't created anything. It's just morphed things.
essentially, yeah.
Okay, and that's what we're doing. I mean, so we'd have to so but to apply the word create, it still gives us a reference point to what is actually going on, even though that it's not from the ex nihilo, the nothingness, but when you manipulate I think if I were to create a song, I would have to use my fingers on a guitar or sing vocally. I would some noise would have to come from something, even though that the vessel in which it's coming from exists already. It's still being created at the moment.
Actually, I think that's a little false. I'm sorry to interject, but
Yeah, go ahead,
however,
please, please.
give the example of like strumming a guitar. The guitar, the strings, the guitar itself, that would be the matter. You strumming that guitar creates sound waves, which in turn travel
Yeah,
throughout space and time. They are just something that we hear based off of matter that we've
being vibrated
displaced,
throughout
that
yeah, yeah,
we've
it's just
displaced the
yeah,
matter, we've
it's just
vibrated it, which in turn causes a reaction, the sound waves.
right.
But the sound waves aren't necessarily a creation or anything. They're not matter itself.
They're an
The matter,
effect.
the
They're the
matter,
effect.
the matter, the matter would have been the guitar and the strings on the guitar. That
Yeah,
the sound
yeah.
waves are not matter.
It's the result of strumming a string, plucking or using our voice and dialoguing. Those things are not the matter that is being moved and manipulated as we're speaking, or strings on a guitar being strummed. They're not being there. You're not creating any new matter. You're just manipulating the matter uh, uh, to allow us to communicate in whatever degree that means. So yeah, I can see where your point is on that. And we're
Well,
not
waves
really
itself, like sound waves, radio waves, they literally are not matter. They're not considered matter in any scientific sense of things. They
no.
cannot be
Well,
matter.
I mean, they're
They're a
not.
displacement of particles that existed, but they are not matter itself. You
No,
get what
but
I'm
it's
saying? The
just
guitar
what
and the
is
strings
happening.
are the
The
matter.
sound is the effect of matter being moved.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's true. So, but and so in your mind, there is no creation at all on the ex nihilo foundation. Is that right? Where things come out of nothingness.
Correct.
Is that right?
But then that makes you question, how is the universe even existent? That's the whole thing. It's all a circular argument.
Because well, yeah, exactly. That's the only circular argument that it works. Because if we do not, if the universe doesn't exist, we do not exist, and therefore, if we do not exist, we don't even recognize if the universe exists because we don't exist. So it's a circular argument. But the fact is, the universe does exist. And we
I'm
know,
hoping I'm hoping that fan is not like too noisy.
no, it's fine.
All
And
right.
we know that the universe, or we know that the universe exists because of our consciousness. That's that's the only thing we really know. That's the only thing we really know is our consciousness and that which is around us. We can our perspective is based on the things that we can see, feel, touch, hear, and all these things. So again, the universe exists. We cannot deny that. That's undeniable. What we question is, can the is did the can we find the place in which whether the universe had already existed, or did it get created by a god? And therefore, do you understand why people created the god that is outside of space and time?
Well, God and the whole Alpha Omega concept really exists because people had no explanation for why reality was reality, why things exist in general. That's why the whole concept of God or an Alpha and Omega was created.
Yeah, but also one of the things that happens
It's a
is
man-made concept to justify
the other
unexplained reasons for life itself.
the reason that they do the god outside of space and time is because he's approachable. He's untouched by human hands. He's because again, if you want to create a god that is superior to all things, just have him create the universe. Therefore, my God, who created the universe, is superior to all things within that universe. They wanted to they wanted to elevate their society up above every other society by establishing a God that was not obtainable by man. Would you agree with that kind of idea, that would be in the minds of those who wanted to oppress people?
Possibly.
Yeah. You know that in the Dark Ages, that people were put to death if they did not accept the Trinity as the theology of and the nature of God.
That would be very true.
Yes. And why did they do that?
It's challenging the system that they uphold.
That's the challenging the system that they uphold, that was created by those who wanted to oppress. So when they established a God outside of time and space, the Trinity of all trinities, they basically said, I am superior to all things because my God, who give me this power, is superior to all that exists.
Which in turn would be a flawed argument because they're creating something that is designed to appear to people as a perfect being, but using it as a justification for their wrong actions.
Right.
Which is why I'm saying it's a man-made concept. Therefore, how are we supposed to uphold this concept and treat it as truth or doctrine or whatnot, whatever you want to call it? Because by design, it was fallible to begin with.
Right. The whole idea of God in creating from ex nihilo is a concept that's flawed in itself. Because
for once, I do not understand where you are going with this, because that was actually the point that I was wanting to bring up later.
Yeah,
but it stemmed from what
because I read minds.
A while ago.
That's one of my gifts. Okay, you just have to accept that. Anyway, what happens is because of that authority coming from God, it was anytime that you remember that in the olden times it was a priest who would give the king his authority, would crown the king. It was always from God's authority that would crown the king. Is that correct?
Can you rephrase that?
Okay. So anytime there was a king that was established in a nation under European rule, there was always somebody from the established church to come and anoint him as being king. Is that right?
Oh,
common.
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. Yeah, yeah. Uh,
So if I'm anointed by a man of God,
then you are
and
anointed by
God
God
is
himself.
the supreme being of all things, that makes me superior to all that exists.
Yeah.
And so it again, we have people establish themselves through this idea that my God is greater than every other God. Therefore, you have to kneel at my beck and call. And so therefore it would what so why would Joseph Smith create a God that's more man-like and not stay within the same parameters as the God outside of time and space?
Well, actually, that would be a little different, the Joseph Smith God compared to the God that you're describing in like medieval times or whatnot. It is slightly different, you are correct. However, in very many ways, it is super similar. It's not too much different. The difference being mainly back then, they said, oh, those things you heard of, the prophets that were able to do miracles and stuff, or modern revelation, not real sometimes in some religions, or other things like God has chosen me, I'm the chosen one. Well, in Joseph Smith's aspect of things, it was a man was called of God, which resembles in very likely characteristics. For example, like we have our current president of the LDS Church, he is a man called of God. Would you agree or not?
Yeah,
Then that would be similar to a king being anointed by a priest who is a man of God.
right. But
So
what
there
is
are similar characteristics
yeah,
to the LDS Church, to the church that you described as very oppressive.
right. So yes, so
So
we
in turn,
have
it is really not that different. And
yeah,
also, it is important to note that Joseph Smith himself, his entire family, has a history of, this is actually documented for some time, being involved with magic, treasure hunting, specific parchments that have magical properties and stuff, or peepstones, or as you would like say in turn with like the translation of the Book of Mormon and stuff, the Urim and Thummim. However, the church as a whole today has downplayed these accounts, these documents, all these practices and things in order to uphold its spotless image by simply declaring them false. It seems very oppressive to me just to uphold an image of themselves. It doesn't seem very different to the church that you described as very oppressive and as a result caused many wars and destruction just to uphold the king's image.
yeah, you could establish a lot of things about Joseph Smith and his history. Fact is, we have his history. You know what I mean? Most people, a lot of people that are agnostics or atheists would deny the fact that even Moses or Abraham ever existed. Why? Because we don't have any records,
Archaeological or anything.
nothing. We so you have a room full of books about Joseph Smith and the
Well,
journals
can
that
I
you
stop
have.
you there 1 second?
Yeah,
I would actually like to counter that. I would say that like Moses and Abraham, as you were saying, some people may say they're false, but actually I would like to say they are real people, not accomplishing the feats or stuff described. Because my principle being, if you're going to tell a lie, the best lie is a part truth. So if I'm going to tell you something, I'm going to tell you something that seems true, has truthful properties to it, but as a whole, it is a lie. So,
so
like, Abraham would probably have been a real person. He would have existed. And some of the things that may have happened could have been similar or just very exaggerated in order to pass off this image of a higher being giving power to someone as a modern prophet at their time.
right.
So I would say he's a real person, but he did not do the things described in the scriptures or stuff that is listed.
Okay. I mean, that's true enough. Now, I'm going to point out a couple of things. Let me ask you a question. What did, what those, things that you were talking about, treasure hunting and things like that. All right. So by Joseph Smith and the peep stones or seer stones, the Urim and Thumb and things like that. So where did those accounts come from? Did they come from the journals of the did they come from the journals of his family to the point where it tore Joseph Smith's down, or did it come from outside sources that tore Joseph Smith down and made accusations?
You bring up a very good point, and I will acknowledge most of these sources come from outside third-party sources that stood there to tear Joseph Smith down. But also, some of these accounts come from people that were part of the church, friends with Joseph Smith, or even Brigham Young, which I would very much get into with some of the doctrines that have been abhorred by the church nowadays that he upheld with Joseph Smith, but also then ended up being countered nowadays. But Brigham Young himself also denounced some of Joseph Smith's like witness things. So when they said
Witness things what?
So when the witnesses, when you look in the inside of the Book of Mormon, where it says the witness accounts, this is true and stuff, Brigham Young himself questioned why these witnesses that were firm believers in it questioned
The church.
themselves the
Yeah.
Book of Mormon and its existence thereof. If they had a firm belief and an undying faith in it, they would not be doubting it. And also the things with Joseph Smith as a whole, yes, he had friends, people that were close to him, that's the reason they left the church, was because they found out his past history and stuff, and they were close with him. But yes, most of the documented things are outside. They are.
And what reason did they have, those who were outside of the church, that would want to tear down Joseph Smith?
Well, there would be a variety, but as a whole, I would probably say to defame him. That's usually what it is with situations like that, which is why I would not take those accounts very seriously. But I would say that for the most part, those accounts would stem from some sort of truth. Usually
Some sort of truth.
Exactly,
which truth, is where, just some sort.
Exactly, which is where we get to the friends, where the friends come into play with being part of the church and then leaving based on these instances. Now, those were the ones I would take into account and consideration the most. The third-party outside sources, not so much. I would acknowledge that they stem from truth, but are not truth at all.
So why did Oliver Cowdery leave
the church? It just acknowledges existence of it.
Yeah. Why did Oliver Cowdery leave the church? He was one of three witnesses.
I would not know his exact intentions in it, as I am not Oliver Cowdery.
There's two things that were established at the time, or three. We'll do three. One is there's three things. One was the polygamy. He wasn't too keen with that. Money. And well, there's probably about more than that, but there's money. And the third thing was that he was being pushed aside as being Joseph Smith's scribe, even though that he was there in the beginning. So.
Oh yeah, okay.
Okay, so Sidney Rigdon takes over the duties. Martin Hare